Welcome to the Sunday Property Breakfast podcast, brought to you by Adrian and Candice at Anderson Jones. Every week we'll be discussing a different property market topic, and don't forget the regular Sunday Property Breakfast every Sunday at 10 a.m. on Facebook. There is probably a Chinese proverb that says you get to where you wanted to go to by a route that you never thought. And I don't know what it is. If you do, let me know. But that's really where we are, having just formed Anderson Jones as a new company with myself, Adrian Jones, and Candice Anderson. And although we've worked together for 2 years, we've now put it on a proper level between us. But also the name is there very much for everybody to see as well. And in the last 3 or 4 weeks of a lot of work, we've been having some really good discussions in order to make sure that our business relationship is correct and on the right level. We've been having some really good discussions about back to basics of why I set the business up, why you joined, what do we see as the challenges and what makes us different, and where we think estate agency and property sales might be going in the future. So I suddenly, in the middle of all of that hard work, we said we really need to get some podcasts going again. That sounds like quite a good subject matter for the podcast. So you then said, well, why don't I just ask you a load of questions and we'll take it from there.
Fantastic. Well, as you have heard, that we've officially now become Anderson Jones. And it's something we used to joke about in the past, didn't we? We used to joke a little bit and go, oh, Anderson Jones has got a lovely ring to it. Sounds really, really good.
Well, there's the Adrian Jones, Anderson Jones, not too different.
Oh, wait for it, AJ.
Yeah, AJ. And
Anderson Jones, Adrian Jones.
It's taken me 2 years to get over the fact that your name comes first, but Jones Anderson didn't work. So.
Well, it's all good.
So,
yes, well, should I ask you those questions which we've discussed?
I think that's the best way.
It's the best way forward. So, as we know, sometimes when change happens, it can be a little bit of a shock in life. However, this change for us has been nothing but what we feel is the speeding up of time, so to speak. So, should we say that the universe has kind of intervened to make it happen quicker?
Yeah, coming back to the proverb, you get to where you want to go to, sometimes by a different route. We always thought from when you joined the business in sort of April 23, once we realised that we could work together, we always said this is where it could go. There is a significant age gap between us. I will not be working when you're still working. I will enjoy the fruits of your labour going forward. So, and we joke about that, but that is actually has always been, once we established a basic working pattern together, that's always been the thoughts of where it would go.
Exactly. So,
far away.
Thoughts. So let's go back to your past. Yep. When it comes to what you did as a real estate agent before, as opposed to now, let's think about what actually inspired you in the beginning to go into this business.
To set up the business.
Yeah.
Again, like a lot of things, it was thrust upon me because it was post-COVID. I just started the job with an agent as heading the land and new homes team. And my background before then, as you know, I studied law, but went into property, and I'd always worked for either developers or land and new homes. I'd never done, for want of a better description, high street agency for owners of properties as opposed to developers. So I was left in a situation post-COVID where I knew that the role that had been created 3 weeks before for me would then be filled by those people coming back to take the role. So I knew I'd be out of work, and that is what eventually happened. And I anticipated that was going to happen. And I was approached by Keller Williams. They said, we need people who've got a really good property background embedded in their community. We don't necessarily need estate agents to set up a business. We give you the structure, and then you run the style of your business with your own sex, your age, your personality to create the business on top of that solid basis.
Which obviously helps thicken the lovely stew, so to speak. But let's go back to the system side of things. Why did you choose at that point in time to use their systems? What was it about Keller Williams?
It was the fact that you could bring your own personality to it. You could create the business you wanted to create. And the reason why I thought there was a gap in the market, I mean, there's no shortage of estate agents.
No.
But if they were all brilliant, I wouldn't have set the business up. And my experience from the last sale of a home I had before I set up my business was the archetypal valuation. The guy walked into the property. I said, do you want a cup of coffee? He said, yeah, I'll have a look around the house while you make a coffee. 5 minutes later, he says it's worth X. We normally charge 1.5%, but we'll do it for 1%.
How did that make you feel?
Well, to be honest, they were the agent most likely to sell because they'd sold 2 or 3 nearby. I was on, it was a new home that was only 4 or 5 years old. So the pricing was only going to be very minimal between the highest and the lowest price. It wasn't like some of the properties we get where literally you could sometimes justify 800,000, you could justify 1 million because they're so unique. This was pretty much obvious where the price would be. And I knew they had a couple of previous buyers from one of the previous types of houses. So they were the obvious agent to go for. The thing that worried me was that he knew nothing about me, knew nothing about the circumstances of where are we moving to, what are our timeframes, when do we want to go on the market. I also was shocked by his negotiation skills, that he actually renegotiated his own commission within the first sentence. I thought, well, I hope you do a better negotiation on the offers. Yeah. And my experience of them selling it, did a decent enough job on the marketing. I think the house was, everybody says this, the house was relatively easy to sell and they found a buyer pretty quickly. And I was not there for the viewings, but the viewings were done, I think, perfectly well. Sales progression was appalling, non-existent.
So it sold within a time frame you were happy with. However, sales progression was appalling.
Was non-existent. Yeah. Well, it wasn't non-existent. It was interfering and meaningless.
Okay. And how did that make you feel as a vendor at the time?
You start losing control. You feel out of control because there's all these various parties, and this is something that we probably not on this podcast. We'll talk about in more detail in future podcasts about the system we're bringing in place to improve that. And that was just a clear indication that one of the biggest complaints of agents is not that they're unlikable people, because most of them are quite personable and likable.
Absolutely.
Not that they can't do the marketing. Most of them do a reasonable job of that. But it's the communication and the after sales bit or after offer bit that is where they typically fall down and still continue to do so.
But as we know that a vendor's home is probably their biggest asset. And that's something which, as an agent, we've got to keep in mind all the time.
It's their biggest asset. For 99% of people, it's their biggest financial asset. Yep. And the other thing that's critical is the roof and security over their family's head. Whether it just be them and their partner, a lot of children, animals, whatever it may be, 2 or 3 generations, it is the roof over their family's head.
Absolutely.
And it's very rare to have anything that is incredibly important financially, but critical personally as well. And that's a very rare mix.
Well, that's the thing. And I think a lot of our listeners and viewers out there would like to probably understand what the pivotal moment was for you to have decided, actually, I really want to do this. Was it just a case of, I don't want to necessarily work with a high street agent? What was it about going out on your own?
The pivotal moment when I thought I'd done it, I'd made the right decision.
That's it. Yeah.
It was actually the very first sale.
Oh,
the very first instruction, which still is the most expensive house we sold in Hartley Whitney, 2.25 million. It was somebody who knew me, trusted me, though not as an agent, but we put together a very, very good proposal. Our competitors were his original agent who he'd bought it from, who he said turned up as if they were just going to get instructed.
Yeah.
And then another agent who had quite a high profile in the area, and we beat them to it as well. So that was rewarding and satisfying. And we did a good job. We've remained friends. We helped them buy their property afterwards. But the interesting anecdote to that is that the other agent who thought they were going to get the business, not his original agent, but the other agent, actually called the owner.
Yeah.
And in the owner's language said it was a very aggressive, rude conversation, questioning his decision.
Yes, yeah.
And also questioning my experience and ability. What was actually really funny is that the call was made when I was with him and he put it on speaker. And that is the moment I thought, I'd already had the confirmation that we could do this as a business. That also told me a lot of what I knew in my heart about a lot of the way agents work. And I'm not suggesting that happens on every single instruction and every single occasion,
No.
but it was typical of what can happen,
Well, that's
which I
it.
find not personally offensive, because he actually was very rude to the owner about the decision he made.
Which is not actually
He can be as rude as he
acceptable.
likes about me if he wants
It's
to
not
be.
professional and it's not acceptable. And I think, because we've had this discussion before, haven't we, Adrian, where, especially with your experience you've had for a long time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Polite way of saying
You're welcome. And I only learn from the best.
Thank you.
There we go. Do we think that licensing real estate agents needs to come into play in the UK? Because I personally do.
Yeah, I think it would.
It's lacking.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. There we are. I don't know another developed country that I've ever got involved in any sort of real estate that isn't licensed.
Yeah.
I don't see why you wouldn't. You know, you have to be licensed to do so many things in this country. It's quite bizarre that you don't have to be licensed. You have things that, you know, you are regulated on certain things about, you know, property misdescriptions, anti-money laundering, which is criminal, you know, criminal offence. So it's not as if you are allowed to be completely rogue and just do what you like, but your basic function of what you do is not licensed. It would, in spite of what I said, the majority of agents aren't bad agents and bad people.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes the structure of the businesses that they work for isn't particularly helpful to the owners.
Yeah.
And it's more in favour of the businesses
more
in
favour of the profits, do you mean?
Yeah, profit gets in the way, profile gets in the way, as opposed to really looking after the individuals as clients. But it would, that little bit of licensing and regulation would, I think, do two things. It would eliminate those who are not good. Yeah. And it would also, I think, just give the industry a little bit of a better status than it has. Because let's be honest, we are, I don't know what the current rankings are, but we are, you know, in that ranking of, you know, politicians and the others for the people you least like and are not going to invite to a dinner party.
Well, that's it. And I'll briefly share my experience, shoe being on the other foot. So my experience of agents in this country, as we know, majority of them, wonderful, you can't fault them.
I think you can fault them, but they're not bad people.
No, they're not bad people. I've recently had a little bit of experience when it comes to how you feel as a tenant when the property you are in is being marketed to sell.
Okay.
Right? And all I will say is this, is that through the whole process, we as the tenants who've been there for a very long time, we felt very disrespected. We weren't asked, could we perhaps do an open house this coming weekend? When will it suit you? It was a case of, this is what we are doing. And by the way, we've reduced the price again, keeping in mind that we would absolutely love to buy that property, but being in our field, we know how much it's actually worth. So that's where it's also lacking within the industry. It's about training your people.
It just comes back to those real basics of something that we maybe touch on about what makes the difference between a self-employed agent and another agent is knowing the people who are instructing you to sell their home.
Absolutely. And where I see the difference with all of this and with what we've been experiencing recently is that we have looked at it and gone, well, we would never do that. You'd give a vendor or a tenant notice as to what you're planning to do. You'd ask them the question.
Am I right in thinking that the original agent who were instructed to sell the house have subsequently sent you direct mail about whether they could be the agent to sell the property?
Yes, that's correct.
So missing two things. One is they actually were marketing it and failed. And secondly, they're sending letters to you as the occupant tenant as opposed to the homeowner.
That's right.
Yeah, that speaks volumes for
now on the subject,
marketing,
which I think is very key to touch on. So in what ways do you tailor the services to meet the client's needs? Understanding each and every single client will be very different. It's not all going to be the same. Yeah,
we work in a relatively small geographical area. We are lucky to work in an area that majority of people are, comfortable, affluent, and what have you. But they will all differ greatly in personality, even if they are doing similar jobs and even if they have children of similar ages and similar, wealth of property. It is utterly about understanding them as people,
Yeah.
their personalities.
Yes, because that's very important, isn't it?
How
you don't think about that.
I'm not completely into the ABCD
characterizing. Yeah.
But you just use, dare I say it, human instinct of when you are a certain age where you think this guy doesn't want detail.
Yeah.
He doesn't want me to sit here or us sit there for 2 hours telling you the fine detail of what we do. It's straight to the point.
That's right.
What do you do? Great. When are you going to do it? And there's other people who want to be told every hour of the day what we're doing, and we message them. There's others who say, just get on with it. Tell me when there's stuff. So it's understanding personalities, but it's understanding, I hate the word their journey because it sounds like we're on some reality show. Why are they selling?
Yep.
When do they want to be moving into the new property? Is it a desire to do it? Is it a need?
Yep.
Is there a ticking time bomb of need? School moving in dates, tax issues.
Yes.
You've also got, sadly, you've got issues of relationship splits and death and health issues.
That's right.
So instead of, we'd like to sell a house and we'll buy one sometime soon, a more relaxed one, you've got something that says if we don't sell by this date, we've got a tax issue, we've got a health issue, a care home issue, whatever it may be. It's understanding that and then understanding the property. And if you've got a bag of marketing tools, you use the ones that are appropriate. I had a conversation on the way here this morning with a developer who's about to instruct us on a new home in Sherfield on Loddon, talking about I was asking him what the previous agent had got wrong, and where we could improve. And he said, well, one of the things they did was a drone shot because the guy really wanted to do one, but it was right next to a garden centre. And this drone shot just showed the garden centre. Now, you can't deny that it's there. And anybody who views the house will know it's there, though you can't see it from the house. But anybody looking at it online sees this really good-looking house, but then says, oh, just seen the drone shot, and it's just right next to the garden centre. So what do? They don't turn up.
So I do have another question for you, and it's within what we've spoken about, but what challenges have you faced within this industry, and how has our personal approach helped manage the situation?
Where do I start?
What comes to mind? Which one comes
probably
to mind?
Two things that are the biggest challenges in the industry from when we set the business up, and my guess is there'll probably still be challenges when I'm not actively involved in it in a few years' time, and maybe even when you finish, but hopefully not. First challenge, I think, is a lot of, and this is a historic issue, a lot of property is overpriced when it comes to the market.
Yep.
There are two reasons for that, in my opinion. The good reason, or the non-bad reason, is that an agent is very optimistic. Mm-hmm. Most clients have a top-end view of the value of their property. They don't see its negatives, maybe. And sometimes the agent doesn't challenge that opinion, and it therefore comes onto the market at a higher price than it should.
Yep.
The other worse version of that is the agent deliberately overvalues in order to win the instruction, because the vast majority of agents have one target above all other targets, and that's to get properties on the market and have market share. Because unfortunately, market research shows that you are most likely to win instructions as an agent by having the most properties on the market. Unfortunately, it's not really the way you should judge it, but it is the way most of the public judge it, because they go online, they go onto Rightmove, and if they see an agent in an area who's got 10 out of 30 properties online, they think that agent must be good. It doesn't mean that agent is bad, but what it says is this agent has got a lot of property unsold. And the question to ask them is how many of those properties get through to sell. We sell about 90% of the properties we get instructed on. Very rare that one doesn't get sold. There's always reasons why. The vast majority have more like a 50% success rate. So that's the bit I really don't like on the pricing element. And it probably will never change. It's a cheap way of winning business, but it will always go on. And there's no problem with being over-optimistic. We've put properties on the market where we've got it wrong, where we've been over-optimistic of a price. I can hand on the heart say I've never put a property on the market where we have said to the vendor, we think that's what it's worth and it's overinflated. We sometimes got it wrong. We sometimes had to reduce it where we thought it was not people don't think it's quite as good, or indeed they need to sell it a bit more quickly and they can't wait. But I can hand on heart say we've never overvalued. The other issue, and there are moves afoot to try and change this, is just the whole conveyancing process. We have a very, very slow system mainly because of its history.
And that comes to my next question. So during the transaction, what would you say makes us unique? How would you explain we keep connected with our client during that actual period? Because it's stressful. And stats have shown that over 50% of people going through the property transaction go through major anxiety, sleepless nights. Some people go into depression because it's that feeling of not having control. So what do we do differently?
Yeah, come back to that same point. Most valuable asset, and it's your family. And when those two clash, because the other thing to remember, very few people just say, do you know what, I'm going to sell my house and buy a better one.
Yeah.
There's nearly always a reason for doing it.
That's
and
right.
It's jobs, it's schools, it's health, it's divorce, it's death, it's marriage, it's children. There's a reason.
That's it.
Some of those are happy reasons, but they still bring stress. Talk about any bride about to get married. It's an incredibly happy experience, but blimey, I bet they go through, well, why do you hear the expression bridezilla? Exactly. So there's the happy stress, but then there's also the very sad stress of, death and debt, divorce, separation. So you've got those two things combining. How do you try and deal with that? Communication.
And how do you communicate?
You communicate basic stuff day to day by WhatsApp.
Yep.
And people say, oh, that's a bit impersonal. No, because there's a lot of stuff where people just need to be kept informed of, we've done this, this has happened, this has happened. We don't need to interrupt them. And both parties, in a typical couple selling, which is, the majority, it means both see it and we don't have to talk to one and then explain to the other. They both see what's happening. But when we need a conversation, we send the message that says, you need to call us, we've got something to talk about. How we deal with the conveyancing process is firstly, do what you can beforehand and be legally prepared to go.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to sell your house and you want to move, here's a choice of solicitors. You may have a referral from a friend of yours who's moved. Pick the one you want, give them everything they need to sell the house. So the moment we sell it, out goes a contract, rather than a 2 or 3 week delay. What a waste of time there.
Oh, they're awful.
Pick a solicitor who you know will do the job.
Yep.
And then make sure there is really good communication within everybody involved.
With that communication, we know that things can get lost in translation, or solicitors can be very, very busy. Our clients would generally give us a call to ask us a question if we're still waiting to receive a call back from the solicitor. Now, keeping in mind that the client will be very, very stressed out, incredibly stressed, because there's moving dates, there's all sorts of things to consider. During that moment, how do you manage the client?
Well, I think this is where it's been said before, the Phil and Kirsty thing comes in.
Oh, yes.
So we've obviously created trust amongst our clients. They wouldn't be using us if we didn't have some trust, and they continue to use us and refer us because we've kept that trust. There will always be issues. Even the sweetest sale that goes through with very little problem, there will always still be a little bit of a problem. It might even just be completion dates.
Yeah.
It might be an issue on the survey, a bit of a problem with the dependent sale being slowed down. There will always be something. No sale goes through that. And of course, there's the real horror stories of the whole chain has got problems and fall throughs in the chain, valuation issues, date issues.
That's right.
I look at it that this is where you joining my business was brilliant, and now that we're working together, even better. I go into solution mode.
You're very good at solution. I must say, honestly, you are very, very good. When you go into solution mode, you always come up with a few different solutions at hand.
Yeah, but what's missing from that is the empathy.
Oh,
and the
yes,
and
that's where I come in.
Where you come in. So my immediate reaction is solution. Your immediate reaction is the comfort call, the cuddle.
That's it.
The physical cuddle, but that's your initial thought.
That's right.
They're feeling pain. You give them a cuddle, non-physical. I'm thinking of the solution, and now we've worked out. I'm in the background thinking of the solution. You're just dealing with the personal side of it, and then we come up with the solution in our discussion between us, which we think is suitable, bearing in mind what you've learned. Yeah. I've got 3 solutions. You've talked to them. You say, I reckon this is the one, and then you deliver it with empathy, or did I deliver it with your empathy, if that's the way forward? And that is, I think, a really, really powerful part of what we do.
And would you say that's kind of the saving grace of that transaction going through? Because sometimes people can get very emotional, very impatient, understandably so.
I think it's confronting the other thing as well. Handling it and dealing with it is one thing, but actually confronting it is another. I think, again, sweeping statement, but agents are often very good at delivering good news.
Yes.
They're not very often good at handling bad news.
And we don't like bad news,
Well,
do
nobody
we?
does,
It's horrible.
and we're all
It's
probably a bit
awful.
guilty of it.
Yeah.
And I think quite often an agent will try and brush a problem under the carpet in the hope it goes away. It doesn't very often go away. And then it just becomes bigger and becomes more of
it does. It becomes a
manifest
monster.
problem.
It becomes a big, giant hulk of a monster. So how do we see the real estate market evolving? And what do you think the personalization, so to speak, touch of it will play in this evolution?
Well, I hope we see licensing.
Yes, me too.
I hope we see improvements to the conveyancing process that speed matters up. We touched on it before, and we will do a podcast actually about Dominus, the system that you're introducing to us.
Very exciting.
Very exciting one. But that's a separate podcast. Otherwise, you'd be here for a long time talking about that.
That's true.
So I hope we get licensed. I hope we get a situation where the conveyancing process is speeded up. At the moment, for every bit of electronic system speeding up, there is something about safety, or that's what I'm trying to think of the word, something about security, safety, other legislation, which then slows it. So you keep this same pace. There is a plus side to our conveyancing system, and that is that overseas buyers see our conveyancing system as being extremely safe because it is so detailed, and because lawyers literally go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. It does mean that foreign investment in the country is very sound with property, and that can't be said for every country where people want to invest.
Absolutely.
Nobody ever has a concern that investing in the UK would be an issue about the title and
the legality.
The legality. And there are countries where that isn't the case.
Yes.
So I hope we see that speeded up. The government are talking about it at the moment. At least they're trying to introduce thoughts on how land registry works and how conveyancing works. It won't be easy. We're dealing with a system that's been going on for centuries. But every little improvement that can be made, if you've got agents licensed, you've got systems like Dominus that then create a circle of involvement of what's going on, all of that will start to speed things up a little bit.
Absolutely.
And I think we should also go, to properties being surveyed ahead of sale.
Yes, that would be fantastic.
It's just so logical.
I don't know how many of you are out there who have been through the process before, and you're thinking to yourself, why couldn't the vendor just, or the agent, take it upon themselves, if you're that confident, get the survey done? Because that saves so much time.
Well, the ridiculous thing about it is, let's just use a simple example of £1 million house, which is above the average, but probably fairly typical to what we sell. Got £1 million house, and you've got a couple who've lived there for 30 years. The house works perfectly well.
Yes.
They're not aware of any issues, but there could be. They're looking to sell it for £1 million. They could get a pre-survey done. Don't quote me on this one, surveyors, if I've undercooked you, but about £1,000.
Yeah.
They could get somebody to go into the property to say, these are the issues that will be flagged up by a buyer.
That's right.
And forewarned is forearmed. It doesn't mean they have to go and do them, but they might get quotes for something that may be an issue. They might do them ahead of the sale, but at least they know what the issues are. Now, in the current situation with the majority, even though we try to get them to do this, we find a buyer for them, or their agent finds a buyer for them, £1 million, and the surveyor comes around, and they do, for the next week, they're like this, praying that nothing comes up that they don't know. Not that nothing comes up that they already knew about and have tried to hide, because they'll never be able to hide that, but something they genuinely didn't know about. The roof beams have twisted.
That's it.
The back wall is, not looking good.
And you're right. And this is where the home selling workshops come into play, which we host, and Adrian is incredibly good when it comes to detail of it, because he originally studied law.
I did, for my sins.
This for his sins. So, coming back to Anderson Jones, such a beautiful
Home
ring.
selling workshop.
There we go.
One coming near you soon.
Very. What is the vision going forward? Or should I say, what is the goal and the vision?
The goal is to create, from a very personal point of view, a business that, we're proud of, a business that obviously makes a good living for us. Can't hide that. It's obviously what you're in business for. But a business where the people we work for, the people we work with, just constantly say, that was a great job that you did for us. Or even, the solicitors, the surveyors, all the people who get involved professionally want to work with us as well. But most importantly, the people who pay us to do the job, which is nearly always the vendors, the buyers who move in, know that we were representing that vendor, but we were helping them. Because you've got to work with both.
Yes, you do.
If you take an alienating attitude to the buyer, that I'm only being paid by the vendor, so you don't count, well, every sale will fall through.
You shouldn't be doing the
job. So you have to work together, albeit you are representing the vendor. So I would just want people to look and say, you were one of the agents who changed the climate of estate agency, not revolution. We can't revolutionize it on our own.
No.
But we were one of those agents who looked at the way estate agency was in this country, and we tried to improve it. And I think a lot of the agents who are doing that, not solely those agents, but those who are going down the self-employed route, working for themselves, working with less people, not interested in the quantity of the business, but the quality of the business.
That's right.
Not interested in getting loads of houses on the market, but making sure they sell 9 out of 10 of the ones that they do. That, if we can get to that and I can retire and then you work really hard and make me a passive income, I will be that's where I want to go.
Delighted to do so, honestly.
Have that in writing, please.
There we go, in writing. So that's the end of the questions I have for you today. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, one very simple thing is I am absolutely delighted that after just over 2 years ago when I said, can you come and work with me? And you said, yeah, let's just get on with it and see how it works.
Yep.
That we've just grown that relationship and understanding. I think if we'd set up Anderson Jones 2 years ago, we'd have probably had some faltering and some issues.
Absolutely.
We've dealt with those whilst we've worked together. And now it's just in a great position to go as our joint business, jointly responsible, our names above, names
very
on the
exciting.
card. Your name on the card. And it's still coming first, which,
Don't worry. Again, AJ, Adrian Jones, Anderson Jones. Still got a good ring to it. AJ, you're still winning.
Yeah, I'm still winning. I'm still
winning.
winning. Yeah, and people remember the Jones bit more than the bit that comes before. They still think it's Adrian.
Go.
Yeah. What they don't know is actually on your business card it says Adrian Jones, but not Anderson Jones. But, yeah. But that's brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks for those questions. I think
it's a pleasure.
It's quite a long podcast, but I think it just encapsulates what we're doing. And I think is for those who don't know us, those who've maybe not caught up with us for a while, because we haven't done one of these for about 6 months, although we're about to kick off with a whole series of them. We've got probate coming up. We've got self-build and land coming up.
My personal favourite.
Another one about staging. That's more your favourite. So we've got a whole load of them coming up. And if you've got any topics that you'd like us to discuss in these podcasts, then please let us know. So thanks very much for watching, listening, and it's been great to be back. Thanks to Jack and the team for putting these on for us. And we'll see you again very soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Sunday Property Breakfast podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Please feel free to share it with anyone you know who you think might enjoy listening in. And if you have a question that you'd like us to answer directly, then just email hello@andersonjones.co.uk. See you next week.